Dear students, we are presenting for you a topic which is called reproductive health. At the moment, the topic heading is contraceptive methods. The different contraceptive methods can be enlisted as follows: natural or the traditional method. Second one is called the barrier. The third one, the intrauterine devices, which is abbreviated as IUDs. And that is followed by oral contraceptives, and at the top I wrote it as implants, and finally the surgical methods. So if you count around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, around 6 methods are listed out here. It is absolutely necessary to learn this particular area called the contraceptive methods because of the population explosion, which is, in a geometric progression. The very first method, the natural or the traditional method, it is divided into the 3: the periodic abstinence, coitus interruptus, and lactational amenorrhea. Now, the very first word, periodic abstinence. We all know that a female in the mid-menstrual cycle, there is ovulation, the release of the secondary oocyte, and that will be passing through the fallopian tube and reaching the ampulo-isthmic junction. This particular aspect we have already dealt with. Now, it is to avoid the syngamy, a process of fertilization or syngamy. It is necessary to avoid the sexual intercourse or the coitus during the 10th to the 17th day. This is essential to prevent the process called fertilization. That is called as periodic abstinence. And the second one, the coitus interruptus. This particular word, coitus interruptus, means there is release of semen at the end of the sexual activity. At that moment, the copulatory organ is removed out from the vagina, and that is what is called the coitus interruptus. And the third one, the lactational amenorrhea. A woman, after her gestation period is done and parturition, we are aware that there is lactation in a female and there will be no menstrual cycle. This particular aspect is combined. The lactational and the lack of menstrual cycle is combined, and we get a word called lactational amenorrhea. If this word is broken up, there is a word called lactation, and that is followed by the word A plus meno plus rhea. So there is lactation, the discharge of the milk; A, the absence of; meno, the monthly cycle of a female; rhea, the discharge. The monthly discharge is absent due to the post-pregnancy, and that is during which there is lactation. This particular period, a very natural and a traditional contraceptive method, during which the chances of syngamy after coitus is bleak or less. We have learnt the very first contraceptive method, which includes the periodic abstinence, coitus interruptus, and lactational amenorrhea, which is the natural or the traditional method. Of course, the chances of syngamy appears to be quite less, but other way around, there could be possibility of fertilization too. Let's study the second method called the barrier method. You can see the pictorial representations of what a diaphragm or a cervical cap is. Here, the barrier method includes the condoms, use of the condoms, the diaphragms, walls, and cervical caps. Now, when you understand the very purpose of this barrier method, the principal aim would be preventing the sexually transmitted diseases. And the aim is met with these condoms prevent sexually transmitted diseases and worn by the males during the coitus. Diaphragms, walls and cervical caps are the other three, and this is for a female, and they act as the barriers, and the semen certainly does not enter into the genital tract, especially into the uterus and the fallopian tube. So, the movement of the sperms is prevented by the usage of these. This is what is called as the barrier method, and this is for the female, the diaphragms, walls and the cervical caps. And in case of the male, the semen discharged will be caught, or rather trapped up in the condoms. The next contraceptive method, dear students, this particular method which I am presenting, the intrauterine devices called the IUDs, this particular area has been asked several times in the entrance exams. So, please do focus. I am dividing this intrauterine devices or the IUDs into the three. First is called the non-medicated IUDs. Second one, the copper releasing IUDs, and the third one, which is called the hormone releasing IUDs. The IUDs basically perform the phagocytosis of sperms, and the copper releasing IUDs, as you can see here, the copper releasing IUDs, the copper T and the copper 7, the multi-load, this one will suppress the motility, the movement of sperms. The last one called hormone releasing IUDs, and the examples being LNG20 and progestated. These two are the hormone releasing IUDs which make the uterus unsuitable for implantation. So, the IUDs are classified or divided into three, and IUDs promote the phagocytosis of sperms, and this is one of the important contraceptive methods. So, we were discussing about this IUDs, which are of three types. Now, woman who wants spacing between two offsprings, the gap between two offsprings, IUDs is one of the popularly adopted methods. The IUDs, barrier, natural or the traditional methods, of course, these are 3 out of the 6. Apart from this, the spermicidal creams, the jellies, can also be used to as a method of contraception. And let us see the next one. The next one being oral contraceptives, probably the birth control pills. The example there is 𝗧. This particular contraceptive, called the oral contraceptive, is taken by the female for about 21 days. That means the menstrual cycle is 28 days, and she takes this pill. This is for the females, and she takes this pill for about 21 days. The remaining 7 days, this is not taken, during which she has her menstruation, and when she is reaching that end of the menstruation, and during that 7 days, probably she can restart using this oral contraceptives or 𝗧 again for a period of 21 days. So, that means in 28 there is a break of about 7 days, and the remaining 21 days oral contraceptives can be taken to prevent the conception. The oral contraceptives for females, this is taken for about 21 days, and there is a gap of 7 days. during which the menstruation happens. This oral contraceptives, when taken by females, will certainly prevent the conception. There is the few salient features for in this method called oral contraception. The ovulation and will be prevented, and the uterus will be certainly made unsuitable for implantation, and there is a change in the quality of cervix. Example for the oral contraceptive is taken there as 𝗧𝗦𝗧. Now this one, the non-steroidal oral contraceptive, is a once in a week pill, and usually with minimum side effects. So after viewing natural barrier IUDs, the oral contraceptives, now let us see what is an implant. We were talking about the implants. Implant is a combination of hormones, the progestrogens, estrogens. This is can be taken or administered. This combination of progestrogen and the estrogen can be administered through injections or implant. Implant works on a similar line or similar principle. This is placed under the skin. You can see here the implant being put under the skin to avoid the contraception. Apart from the implants, the combination of progestrogen and estrogen together with the IUDs within 72 hours of sexual intercourse could be an emergency method to prevent fertilization. The last method, called the surgical method, which includes the vasectomy and the tubectomy. Let us see the word vasectomy. This is tomy is cut and ectomy is the surgical cutting of the vas deferens. You can see it clearly in the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system, this is the vas deferens, and this vas deferens is surgically cut and tied and cut, and even the same thing on the other side, because there are two vas deferens. This is called the vasectomy, and that is a surgical method of preventing the conception. The other one called the tubectomy, this is for the females, and we can see the fallopian tubes there tied and cut. So when the fallopian tubes are tied and cut, this method of preventing pregnancy and of course permanently, this is called the tubectomy. Surgical methods, vasectomy and tubectomy, are the permanent methods to prevent conception. The different contraceptive methods we have examined, and there is natural or traditional, the barrier, the intrauterine devices, oral contraceptives, implants, and finally the surgical methods. When we have seen a very different types of contraceptive methods, at times there is a need for the medical professionals to support you in this particular procedure. We are working on this contraceptive methods or techniques against the natural course of action to avoid the pregnancy. The goal or the aim is to control the population explosion. What could be the side effects of the use of contraceptive methods? Though not significant, let's consider some of them. Nausea, abdominal pain, the menstrual bleeding, and irregular menstruation are some of the ill effects or side effects of the contraceptive methods. Of course, though not significant. What could be the ideal contraceptive? I have enlisted here the various virtues of the ideal contraceptive: user friendly and easily available, effective and reversible. Example, like the IUDs, once implanted into the female body, can be taken away. So, effective and reversible. No, or with least side effects, and should not interfere with the sexual desire or drive. So, these are all some of the features of ideal contraceptive. The next part of the learning is STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. The various STDs are listed here: gonorrhea, syphilis, trichomoniasis, genital warts, chlamydiasis, hepatitis B, genital herpes, and finally the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. These different types of STDs caused by the various disease causing germs. Some of them are viral, some are bacterial, protozoan. For example, the Trichomonas vaginalis causes the disease called the trichomoniasis, and acquired immunodeficiency syndrome is caused by the virus. So, it could be a viral, bacterial, or a protozoan diseases. Now, when these diseases do affect human health, naturally for a healthy society it is certainly a threat. What could be the complications concerning these diseases in general? Pelvic inflammations, swelling in the pelvic regions, abortions, the implantation process, the normal female gestation period, that doesn't unfold, it doesn't unfold. Abortions, stillbirth, probably the young one is born without life. Ectopic pregnancies, the implantation should occur under natural circumstances in the endometrium of the uterus. If the implantation process happens in other regions other than the endometrium of uterus, we call it as ectopic pregnancies, and certainly they don't last long. And the last one is infertility, unable to bear the children. There is no progeny for that kind of organism in infertility. Now, what group of, or which group certainly gets affected with this STDs? Probably the age group where sexual activity is a bit pronounced, and that is about 15 to 24 years of age. Now, let's study some of the diseases, especially focusing on the hepatitis B and the AIDS. What could be the ideal method to avoid the STDs in the reproductively active age group? Now, sexual activity with unknown or multiple partners, they do stand a chance to get infected. And what about the second one? Always use the condoms. In this thing, I would like to call it as the contraception methods. We have discussed before the different contraceptive methods. And the third one, certainly medical intervention. The doctor's suggestions are vital for a healthy life and a healthy body. Now, a qualified doctor certainly participates in a process wherein the disease, if you feel so, if you feel that you are affected by STDs, it is advisable to consult a qualified doctor, go for diagnosis, and once the disease is confirmed, certainly there would be a treatment. For the different STDs, when we are consulting a qualified doctor, after the diagnosis and treatment, there is probably a cure. Let us now see some of the diseases wherein there is no proper complete cure except for the suffering. And one of them being a very popular disease, that is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome caused by this virus called the HIV. Now, the human immunodeficiency virus, which is here, you can see it, all these are the glycoproteins. These glycoproteins which are here, glycoprotein the 120, GP120, which we call it as, this GP120s here will adhere to such type of immune cells which carry CD4, and this is incurable. And HIV certainly brings down or puts down a human immune system and opens the gateway for several diseases, and this is incurable. We have learnt disease by name AIDS caused by HIV. Hepatitis B, genital herpes, AIDS. Apart from these three diseases, the other diseases can be cured, and certainly when you start your diagnosis and treatment a bit early. Now, hepatitis B and AIDS, how do these diseases which prove detrimental to the body, how is it spread? How are they spreading? Surgical instruments, the usage of surgical instruments, through them the needles and unprotected sexual activity are some of the channels through which these viruses can be transferred from one to another. And last but not the least, from mother to the offspring too. We have seen several segments in this particular topic called the reproductive health, one being the contraceptive methods, other being sexually transmitted diseases. And now, let us get into another domain, and that is infertility. India certainly has a huge population explosion, but many couples are infertile, unable to bear children, have the progeny. The reasons could be many, and I have just listed some of them. See, physical, congenital diseases, drugs, immunological, psychological. So, the reasons could be physical, it could be congenital diseases, or it could be the drugs or immunological problem, the psychological, and of course, many more. When couple do not bear children and want to have their next generation, their progeny, there is a scientifically approved, and the scientific world certainly comes into play to help these childless couples. What is that method called? It is called as assisted reproductive technology, abbreviated as ART. I would like to delineate, describe the several methods pertaining to this assisted reproductive technology. I am teaching you the first method in the assisted reproductive technology called in vitro fertilization and embryo transfer. For this process, we need the female gamete and the male gamete. The ovum or the female gamete can be obtained from the wife, or it could be a female donor, a healthy donor. And the sperm, the male gamete, can be taken from the husband or a donor. These two gametes are fused in laboratory conditions. So, once the ovum and sperm fuse, we get the diploid cell called the zygote. This is simulated lab condition, a condition which is a replica or resemblance of the actual fallopian tube, but outside the body. Therefore, it is called in vitro fertilization. It is certainly outside the body of the female this process is taking place. Once the zygote is formed, we call it as in vitro fertilization, and it begins to perform the mitosis or the cleavages to become the blastomeres. If the blastomeres are, or the zygote or the blastomeres up to around 8 cell can be transferred into the fallopian tube, we can call the transfer of zygote into the fallopian tube of the female as zygote intrafallopian transfer. The name is suggesting that zygote is transferred, T is already there, intra, within or the fallopian tube. So, it is ZIFT, zygote intrafallopian transfer. Now, if the embryo, the 8-celled body multicellular unit, if it continues to divide and becomes much more in terms of cellularity, it is into the uterus, it can be transferred, and we can call it as intrauterine transfer. So, if it is into the fallopian tube, we call it intrafallopian transfer, and if it is into the uterus, it is intrauterine transfer. The only difference would be at what stage is the point. Suppose it is at zygote or the blastomere, the initial, you can call it as zygote intrafallopian transfer. If it is a bit advanced, and we all know advanced could be 8, 16, 32, that stage it is into the uterus, and we can call it as intrauterine transfer. Delineated, explained the in vitro fertilization. Now, that is a pictorial representation of the zygotes placed in the oviduct, which are formed by the in vitro fertilization. Actually, here oviduct referring to the fallopian tube. We can look at this picture wherein the zygote is being 2-celled and up to 8-celled. We can transfer into the female reproductive tract, and this is what is called zygote intrafallopian transfer. The second method is gamete intrafallopian transfer. What could be the reason for the transfer of the gametes into the body of the female? The reason is the female is unable to produce the gamete, and when she is incapable of producing the gamete, but she provides a suitable environment for fertilization within her fallopian tube, there is a need to introduce the gamete into the fallopian tube. So, ovary unable to deliver ovum, and when the female is not capable of producing the ovum, the only method is to introduce the gamete taken from a donor into the fallopian tube of the female. This process is termed as the gamete intrafallopian transfer, also called the gift, and this will be followed by fertilization, and after which there will be formation of zygote and further embryonic development, which takes place in the uterus after implantation. We have seen the method called ZIFT, gift and intrauterine transfer, and now let us study intracytoplasmic sperm transfer. As you can see clearly in this particular representation, this is the syringe or the needle carrying the male gamete, which is directly introduced into the cytoplasm of the female gamete. This technique is called as intracytoplasmic sperm transfer. I repeat, intracytoplasmic sperm transfer, wherein the sperm is introduced, delivered into the cytoplasm of the female gamete. This leads to the formation of zygote. This process should be done in the laboratory conditions. Once the zygote formation is done and it begins to grow into an embryo, which can be transferred into the uterus of the female. I conclude this area by talking about the last method, which is called as the artificial insemination. Artificial insemination. When the male is unable to inseminate or has very low sperm count in the ejaculate, the technique is termed to achieve pregnancy, is termed artificial insemination, wherein the sperms are introduced into the female genital tract, and this is what is called the artificial insemination method. I presented to you the various techniques involved in assisted reproductive technology. Now, these different methods would finally result in the making of the offspring to the couple who are childless. At times, it becomes necessary to seek the help of a surrogate mother. She provides shelter to a offspring for whom she is not the biological mother. And the goal of art is to have a progeny or a child to the childless couples. But India is such a vast country wherein the population is much. Probably childless couple should also think of adoption. Dear students, we have started our journey in this topic called the reproductive biology, learning about the male reproductive system, female reproductive system, gametogenesis, fertilization, embryonic development, the gestation period, the development of extra embryonic membranes, the terminology required for the placenta, and finally there is parturition, lactation. Today we will end this particular area of learning with a topic called reproductive health. The idea about the reproductive health for every individual in his journey of life should start from an early stage. The misconceptions, the myths, the erroneous thinking about this should be eroded. A child, as he grows up, should be aware of various aspects about his reproductive health. Now, to become aware or to generate the awareness, the role of media certainly is important for the dissemination of knowledge concerning the reproductive aspects. Friends, relatives, teachers, parents certainly have a very critical role to impact a child's mind and give him a better positive thought about the reproductive health. And this proper information about the reproductive organs, the adolescent changes should be given to the young mind with a positive thought, because the negativity should be removed, and here he must also be aware of safe, hygienic sexual practices. In fact, in this topic, there is a special region which focuses upon the sexually transmitted diseases caused by viruses, bacteria, protozoans, which we will be learning in the topic called sexually transmitted diseases. A growing child, especially once he reaches adolescence, the need to understand about the reproductive health is much more. This awareness certainly will control the population explosion. The awareness can also be further enhanced, providing proper infrastructure, professional expertise, especially when we talk about the contraceptive methods, and immunization, wherein the child is resisting various diseases, the feticides, and something which is very incorrect is the female feticide. In the years which has passed, when we speak about the feticides, is something which is an evil practice, especially the female feticide. Amniocentesis was a procedure which was introduced to understand the abnormalities, genetic abnormalities or abnormalities in the making of the young one prior to the birth. And this process was misused in identifying the gender of the organism, and if female, it led to female feticide. And this is something, a very incorrect practice, and of course this is banned. And a growing female, in addition to learning about the reproductive organs, the health, sexually transmitted diseases, should be aware of the basic scientific concepts involving the menstrual cycle, abortions, infertility, etc. All these multi-dimensional inputs aim at one thing: socially conscious, healthy families of desired size. Dear students, before we unfold this topic called the reproductive health, let's understand why there is a need to learn the various contraceptive methods. We all know India is heading for a population explosion, and there is a need to curtail this geometric growth, this exponential growth in fact. And that is achieved, and that is possible only by methods like the one which I am going to present before you, like the contraceptive methods. After understanding the topic reproductive health, let us view some of the possible questions. Here I have taken one multiple choice question. I read it. Which of the following methods of contraception makes uterus unsuitable for implantation? Observe this 1, 2, 3, 4. Almost all are the abbreviation, some of the letters are matching. The very first one, IUT, intrauterine transfer. Our point is contraception, not assisted reproductive technology. So, that is intrauterine transfer is incorrect. And see the second one, intrauterine insemination, even this one is also a part of the art. The third one, intrauterine device. This would be the right answer because intrauterine devices like hormone releasing and copper ion releasing, they prevent conception. So, they are part of contraceptions. And the last one, 𝗖𝐶𝗺𝗺 intracytoplasmic sperm injection is also part of art. So, amongst these 4 options, 3 abbreviations given are part of art. What are those 3? Intrauterine transfer, intrauterine insemination, and the 4th one, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So, 1, 2 and the 4th one are not related to contraception. So, 3rd would be the answer. Now, the second one, another multiple choice, which one of the following STD, sexually transmitted disease, is caused by a virus but affects the immune cells of the body. Now, there are 4 options here: AIDS, trichomoniasis, hepatitis B, and all the above. Which of the following sexually transmitted disease is caused by virus? It affects the immune cells of the body. So, when you look at this option, 2 of them are, like the first one and the 3rd one are viral, and trichomoniasis is Trichomonas vaginalis, which is a flagellate protozoan. All the above cannot be an answer. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome is certainly a sexually transmitted disease caused by the virus called HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, and this is the one which affects the human immune cells, targeting the one which is having CD4. Trichomoniasis, incorrect. Hepatitis B, of course viral, but may not affect the immune cells carrying the CD4, and definitely the answer is AIDS caused by the HIV. The third question is select the incorrect pair. Let us see the first one, tubectomy concerning the fallopian tube. That is true, because in tubectomy we cut the fallopian tubes, tie them, and that is one of the methods, surgical methods, to permanently prevent the conception. What about vasectomy concerning vas deferens? That is true. The male reproductive system will have a pair of vas deferens which are cut and tied up, and that is also true. So, 1 and 2 both are correct. What about copper releasing IUDs? LNG20 is a hormone releasing IUD, and that cannot be a copper releasing IUD. And so, the incorrect pair will be third one. What about the fourth, barrier? We all know that walls, cervical caps, diaphragms and condoms are certainly a part of the barrier method. So, the answer would be copper releasing IUDs, LNG20 is the incorrect pair. Now, this one is a diagram based. In this diagram, if you observe a very rough sketch of the sperm being directly introduced into the cytoplasm of the egg or the female gamete. Now, after observing this particular diagram, it means that this is done outside the female body, and where the sperms are introduced directly into the cytoplasm, and this is certainly intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Let us see the options here. Now, the very first one is zygote intrafallopian transfer. Now, zygote intrafallopian transfer is introducing the zygote, as we have learnt, up to maximum of 8 cells, the zygote to 8 cells into the fallopian tube. That is called ZIFT. And the second one called gamete intrafallopian transfer. This method is a method wherein the gametes are introduced into the fallopian tube. So, that is called gamete intrafallopian transfer, and we all know that the female probably is not able to produce the ovary in this case called the gift. And the third one, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, very clearly it is very evident that this is 𝗖𝐶𝗺𝗃. The last one, intrauterine device. The diagram has no relation with this intrauterine device. So, the correct answer would be intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Let us see another model wherein list 1 and the list 2 are presented here. Look at the list 1, 𝗂𝗍𝗪 medical termination of pregnancy, LNG20 multilode 375. If we talk about the word 𝗂𝗍𝗪, that is an oral pill. An oral pill, the non-steroidal oral pill, once in a week pill called 𝗂𝗍𝗪. Then what about MTP? The medical termination of pregnancy is a kind of nothing but the induced abortion. And LNG20 is a hormone releasing intrauterine device, and multilode 375 is a copper releasing IUD. So, it goes like this: A will be 2, B will be 1, C will be 4, and multilode, that is the D, will be 3. Now, there is a necessity to, it is necessary to understand or take few hints, especially when we deal with IUDs. Probably when we talk about this LNG, I am just hinting you, G, hormone releasing. So, how do we recollect that? Progesterone has G, and LNG. Probably that will help you, dear student, that will help you. Probably this is LNG20G, and the progesterone is also having a letter G. So, this type of models wherein some of them are multiple choice, directly one word answer, selecting the correct pairs, incorrect pairs, and the questions based on contraceptive methods, assisted reproductive technology. So, revise, especially that the IUDs, this question has come quite a number of times, and terminology, ZIFT, GIFT, IUDs, intrauterine transfer, IUT, etc. So, I hope this will be of immense help. Dear students, this brings us to the end of a detailed study of human reproductive biology. The journey has started with an overall overview of the male reproductive system. We spoke about testes, the several accessory ducts, the glands, external genitalia, both in the male and the female. And in the female, ovary being the primary sex organ, the accessory ducts including the fallopian tube, etc., and the accessory glands and external genitalia. Gametogenesis, the process, the events involving the gametogenesis ultimately led to the making of gametes, and that was followed by the idea of learning syngamy or fertilization, which we can call it as conception. So, after conception, we have learned the formation of zygote, implantation, the development of extra embryonic membranes, amnion, chorion, yolk sac, the placenta, amnion, the chorion, the allantois, the yolk sac. We have highlighted the concept of placenta, how hormones are released from the placenta, lactation and the benefits of breastfeeding, the composition of milk and hormones which affect the growth of the human female mammary glands. And after that particular segment, we have concluded this topic by understanding the finer aspects of human reproductive health. We have thrown light on several aspects which include the contraceptive methods, the assisted reproductive techniques, the so-called art, and the need for a young growing organism child to understand personal hygiene, about the adolescence, the changes, to bring up a organism, a social being who is responsible. We have highlighted the different sexually transmitted diseases too. The chapter ended with assisted reproductive technology. In this area, we have used the words called gift, where the gametes are transferred into the fallopian tube. We have used the word called the 𝗧, wherein the zygote is transferred into the fallopian tube, and we have reasoned out as to why this technique is used. The technique is used to make us understand. The technique is used because the female is providing an environment for growth of the young one, but not for fertilization. So, when the fallopian tube is unsuitable for fertilization, we will transfer the zygote into the uterus, into the fallopian tube. So, we call it as zygote intrafallopian transfer, gift, 𝗧, and the embryos can be directly implanted, and that is called intrauterine transfer. And when the sperm count in a male, or the ejaculate or the semen count is low and the male is unable to inseminate, we spoke about artificial insemination too. Focus on important words, the sequences, important terminology sequences, and hope this particular topic has made us understand the nuances of the human reproductive biology and reproductive health.